It's 1 in the morning and you're subtracting again. Your age minus what you've actually built. Behind is a verdict issued against a deadline nobody ever asked you to sign. There are 10 rules here. None of them will make you faster. All of them get you off a scoreboard somebody else chalked. By the end, you'll be running on 2 numbers instead of 20, and both of them will be yours. Rule 8 is the one that costs something. It also decides whether the other 9 hold. Rule 1. Before you fix your pace, audit the schedule. Every deadline you are currently failing was set by someone at some point, and it is almost never you. A man of 34 is awake in the dark, doing subtraction. The salary he assumed he'd have by 30, the house his cousin bought last spring, the book he told people he was writing when he was 26. Trace those 3 numbers back to where they actually came from, and you find a careers talk he sat through at 19, a magazine list of people under 30, and one offhand remark his father made in 2011 and had forgotten by dinner. Not one person in that story is still keeping score. He is the sole remaining auditor, working against a budget 3 strangers drew up, for a life that was never theirs to plan. Epictetus set this down in the Enchiridion. People are disturbed not by things, but by their judgments about things.
Behind lives entirely in the judgment layer. Nothing in the event layer has a date printed on it. Write down the exact deadline you believe you missed, then name who said it and when. If you cannot name them, you are obeying a ghost. That rule is free. The next 2 are not. Rule 2 is what everything after it stands on, and Rule 3 is the one most people have exactly backwards. Rule 2. Split every day into 2 columns and spend nothing on the second. 9 days ago, a woman sent the application. Since then, she has refreshed the inbox somewhere north of 400 times. It starts at 6:40 in the morning, before her feet are on the floor. Phone off the nightstand, thumb down. Wait for the spinner, nothing. She does it again at 6:44 while the kettle runs. Column 1, the things that obey her, the quality of the work, the number of applications out, the follow-up she still hasn't written. Column 2, the things that don't, the hiring freeze announced on a Tuesday in a room she wasn't in, the internal candidate who was always going to get it, the recruiter's flight delayed out of Chicago on the morning her file was meant to be discussed. She has spent 9 days of a finite life entirely in column 2. Column 1 has not moved an inch. That follow-up email would have taken 4 minutes.
3 sentences, thanking them for the conversation, naming the one problem she'd mentioned in the room and how she'd approach it in her first month. It sits unwritten because she is busy, genuinely, exhaustingly busy, with a Chicago flight schedule she has no access to. Nobody is coming to tell her which column she's standing in. That's the whole difficulty. Column 2 feels like effort. It burns the same fuel, produces the same exhaustion by evening, and returns nothing you can point at. Rule 3. Grade yourself on the release. The Stoics kept an image for this, preserved in Cicero's account of their ethics. The archer's job is stance, draw, aim, release. The instant the arrow leaves the string, the wind owns it. A perfect shot can be pushed wide by a gust coming off the field. A careless one can still find the center. Grade only landings and you learn nothing from either result, and eventually you stop shooting altogether, because shooting has quietly become a thing you can only lose at. So score 1 number before you shut the laptop. Shots taken. The landing is weather. Which leaves the question the columns don't answer. If the split is that clean, why does one photograph of a stranger's kitchen still undo an otherwise decent week? Rule 4. You are comparing yourself to the survivors.
During the Second World War, a statistician named Abraham Walt was asked to help the American military armor its bombers. Analysts had mapped the bullet holes on planes coming back from raids, and the damage clustered in obvious places: the wings, the fuselage. Reinforce there, they said. Walt pointed at the gap in the data. Those holes were on the planes that came back. The engines and the cockpit looked clean because aircraft hit there never returned to be measured at all. Armor the empty spaces. Now put your feet on that same table Every profile you scroll past is a returning bomber. You see the person who quit at 29 and won. You do not see the 11 who made the identical bet and are back in an office on the 4th floor, saying nothing about it online. Daniel Kahneman named the second half of the trap the focusing illusion. Nothing in life looks as important as the thing you happen to be staring at while you think about it. You are staring at one number in one stranger's life and letting it index your entire decade. Before any comparison, ask 2 questions. What is the denominator? And what part of this person's life am I structurally unable to see? Then close the app. Rule 5. Motivation arrives late and takes credit for the work. Marcus Aurelius opens the 5th book of his private notebook by admitting he does not want to get out of bed.
The most powerful man in the known world, negotiating with a blanket, and then answering himself on the page, "Is this what I was made for? To lie here under the covers and keep warm?" What stands out is the repetition. He had that argument every morning, in writing, for years. The modern version is smaller and less dignified. A writer who isn't in the right headspace opens the document and deliberately types one bad sentence, bad on purpose. The seal is broken, there's nothing left to protect, and the work starts. Clinically, this has a name: behavioral activation, a frontline treatment for depression, which works by scheduling the action before the mood improves, rather than waiting for the mood to authorize the action. Movement comes first. Evidence follows it. Motivation shows up third, if at all. Set the entry cost absurdly low. Pre-commit to mediocrity. 4 minutes, done badly on purpose. The goal is 4 minutes of being a person who is already moving. Everything so far has been machinery outside you. It has been the clock, the columns, the filtered sample, and the first 4 minutes of a hard morning. Fix all of it. Run it clean for 3 weeks, and you can still lose the year. Because none of that is what ends a comeback. What ends a comeback is a sentence, usually one you say to yourself on a Thursday about a Tuesday. Rule 6. One missed day is not evidence.
A woman misses Tuesday's run because a call runs long, and the shoes stay by the door with the laces still tied from Sunday. Wednesday, she runs 4 kilometers in the rain and comes home pleased with herself. Thursday, at the sink in the office kitchen, rinsing a mug while a colleague asks how the training is going, she hears herself say it out loud: "I've fallen off." She isn't even sure why she said it. By Saturday, she has stopped checking the weather in the morning. By Sunday, the shoes are in the cupboard, under the tote bags, laces still tied. Nothing happened on Wednesday. She ran 4 kilometers in the rain on Wednesday. The sentence did all the work, and the sentence is what she'll still be paying for in November. Dieters who believe they have already blown the diet eat substantially more that evening than dieters who believe they haven't. Same food. Polivy and Herman named it the "what the hell" effect. The damage was done by the sentence. A broken streak costs you 1 day. The verdict you issue about the broken streak costs you the month. After a miss, count the days you kept. Rule 7. If a task is too heavy to start, cut the unit smaller. Carl Wieck made the argument formally back in 1984. Problems framed at massive scale produce paralysis, and small wins work by changing the scale until action becomes possible again.
Teresa Amabile's research on the progress principle found something adjacent. On the best work days people report, the common ingredient is visible forward movement. Usually it was movement small enough to miss, but you could point at it. Which is why a man can stand in the doorway of a garage full of his late father's belongings and do nothing for 2 years. Boxes to the ceiling, a workbench somewhere under all of it, the smell of old paper and engine oil. The phrase in his head is "clear the garage," and "clear the garage" is unliftable. He has now failed to lift it for 2 years, not through weakness, but because that phrasing has no first move inside it. 1 shelf, Saturday, 1 hour. That he can do. Name the smallest unit of work you'd be slightly embarrassed to call a task. That is today's task. Rule 8 is the one I told you would cost something. It's shorter than the others. Take it slower. Rule 8. Be your own judge, not your own prosecutor. Seneca describes his own nightly practice, the lamp out, the house quiet, his wife gone silent beside him, going back over the whole day, hiding nothing from himself, excusing nothing. He is pleading his own case, and he is also the one on the bench. That second part is what most people skip. He says he can examine himself without dread, precisely because the court is fair. Here is what a fair court sounds like.
A friend sits across your kitchen table and tells you she is 39 and starting over. You do not say you wasted a decade. You'd never say it. And not because you're being kind, but because it isn't accurate. You ask what she has now that she didn't have at 29. She has a read on people now, a tolerance for boredom, and the ability to tell when something is going wrong 3 weeks before it does. Kristen Neff has spent years on what self-compassion actually does, and a study by Brains and Chen found that people given a self-compassionate framing after a failure were more motivated to improve afterward. Harshness makes you flinch away from looking, and you cannot fix a thing you refuse to look at directly. Run the day's review out loud, in the second person, in the voice you'd use for someone you actually like. You are reviewing the same facts in a court that is finally fair. A fair court can do a great deal. There is one thing it cannot do. It cannot refund anything. Rule 9. You cannot spend the same 6 years twice. Picture a man carrying a small suitcase everywhere he goes, full of receipts for purchases he regrets. He opens it at every meal, reads a few, closes it, carries it into the next room. He has read some of these so many times the ink has gone soft.
He has not returned a single item. Nothing in the case is refundable, and he knows it. That is what 6 years in the wrong field feels like when you handle it wrong. Saying, "I have already put 6 years into this," is a reason to stay only if those 6 years can be spent again. They are gone. Nothing you do now spends them again. Susan Nolan Hoeksema spent a career documenting what rumination actually does. It prolongs low mood, and it leaves the problem exactly where it was, while feeling the entire time like thinking. Marcus Aurelius arrived at the same edge from the other side. Whatever you lose, you can only ever lose the present moment, because the past isn't yours to lose, and the future isn't yours yet. Give the review a timer, 20 minutes, 1 page, and it must end with a single decision written down. A review is bounded and ends in a choice. Anything that ends in a feeling was something else. If nothing was decided, put the suitcase down. There is a reason tonight, specifically, is the night to do this. Dye, Milkman, and Rees documented the fresh start effect. People are measurably more likely to begin pursuing a goal at a temporal landmark, a new week, a birthday, the first of a month. The landmark lets you draw a line between an old, flawed self and a new one, and nothing about the world actually changes at midnight on a Sunday. The line is invented. It works anyway.
Which means the only real question left is what you'll have in place when the first hard night arrives. Because it will, and it usually arrives around Wednesday. Rule 10. Rehearse the bad day before it shows up. Seneca practiced disaster on purpose. He set aside days to eat the plainest food, wear the roughest clothes, sleep badly, and then ask himself the question, is this it? Is this the thing I've been afraid of all this time? He called it a rehearsal rather than a punishment.
You meet poverty in a room where it can't reach you. The modern half is Peter Gallwitzer's work on implementation intentions. A plan in the form, if this happens, then I will do that, beats the same goal held as a good intention, because it hands the trigger to the situation instead of to your willpower. And your willpower is precisely the thing that will not be there on Wednesday evening. Think of fire drills. Nobody walks calmly out of a burning building because they're brave. They do it because they once walked the same route at 10 in the morning on a Tuesday in March, when nothing was on fire. Tonight, write 3 if-then lines for the 3 specific ways next week will go wrong. A man I'll call Daniel wrote his on the back of an envelope on a Sunday evening in February. If I miss Monday's session, then Tuesday is a 4-minute day, not a rest day.
If the meeting runs past 7 and I come home too tired to cook, then dinner is eggs, and I still open the laptop for 1 page. If I check my old classmate's profile again, then I close the app and write 1 line of my own thing before I open anything else. 3 lines that take 11 seconds each to read. He kept 2 of the 3 that week. What mattered is that he did not have to think on the bad night, because the thinking was already done on the good one. Rehearsed, a bad day costs you a day. Improvised, it costs you a season. That is what tonight is, a line you get to draw, and it leaves you with the 2 numbers I promised you at the start, what you do next and how you judge yourself for it. Every rule in the last 20 minutes has been a way of clearing the other 18 numbers off the board, because they were never measuring you. They were measuring how well you match a schedule you were handed and never read. So go back to the man in the dark, doing his arithmetic. Same room, same hour, everything you now know, standing in it with him. He was never behind. He was early to a race that doesn't exist, on a track somebody else chalked, holding a stopwatch he inherited from people who stopped watching years ago. The math was always going to come back wrong, because the math was never his. Neither is yours.
The day you finally admit you feel behind is as good a landmark as any calendar will ever hand you. Nothing has changed. Put the arrow on the string. If this is the voice you want in your head on the bad nights, stay close. There's another one waiting, and it will be here on the next hard night. Subscribe, and it finds you.